Donald Trump somehow freaked everybody out again. I mean, he's got a habit of doing this, right? As you well know by now. Well, he said some things down in South Carolina at a rally, and he might have been joking around a little bit. He shared part of a personal conversation, which we can only assume was with Vladimir Putin. And I think you need to hear it. And then more importantly, you need to hear the response to it. Let's listen to Donald Trump in South Carolina.
They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Okay. There you go. There you have it. You know, this was a sticking point for him all along. Remember how annoyed he was? He's like, I don't get it. Like, why are we, the military to the world, helping to ensure everybody else's safety? Why aren't they paying their fair share? I mean, why are we spending such a large percentage of our overall GDP, our overall economy, compared to, look at Germany, look at France. Nobody's willing to take it on. And so this was part of his mantra all along, and it drove people crazy because they're like, wait a second, but we've always done this. And you know what? He was absolutely right. I'm going to just tell you right now, like, we don't have the money. Thank you very much. We are not what we once were, as they say. I think there's a country song like that. We're just not. And so with this enormous debt, which keeps escalating, hence my shout out to Legacy Precious Metals earlier, with this enormous debt, 34 trillion and counting, we don't have the ability to just keep funding all of these security operations all around the world. It makes sense that if you want us there, hey, you're going to chip in too. And so Donald Trump driving that point home over the weekend in South Carolina, and oh my gosh, did this ignite a you-know-what storm, shall we say, led by head of the Schiff Show. First of all, here's a New York Times report that came out immediately. He's favoring our enemies, favoring foes over friends. Trump threatens to upend international order. Yeah. Maybe then they'll pay. I mean, I'm just saying, maybe then they will actually pay. What are they supposed to contribute? Some certain percentage of their GDP, and they're way behind, certainly in Germany and in France and other locations. So the New York Times is like, oh my gosh, this is, the end of the international world order as we know it, because he made this little comment in South Carolina. I don't think it's entirely different from some of the things we've otherwise heard him say. It's just that it's the latest and greatest. And they're desperate. They're searching. So the star of the Schiff Show, that would be Adam Schiff, the congressman from California, he was all over Twitter saying, oh, Reagan would be so upset. Trump bragged that he'd encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want to our NATO allies if they didn't spend enough on defense. He's more interested in aggrandizing himself and pleasing Putin than protecting our allies. It would make Reagan, it would be enough to make Reagan ill. I'm not so sure about that, guys. Again, you're inferring a lot, but I do think there's something to be said for Trump saying, you know what, we can't afford it. Now, maybe he's bluffing. Maybe that's all it is. But I do think that the European nations started paying more in terms of whatever they had to give to NATO under the Trump administration. And I would imagine if Donald Trump were back there, then guess what? They would pay again. But Adam Schiff is mad, and then, CNN's mad. The chief foreign correspondent over there, Christiane Amanpour, who I do believe has lived in the United States since she was like 10, yet still speaks with this really affected, fancy accent. Here is Ms. Christiane Amanpour this morning on CNN saying how bad this was.
Christiane, while you're here, I need your take on Trump over the weekend and what he said about NATO and sort of the door he opened for Russia. And the reaction of world leaders to that you're hearing.
You know, Poppy, it is insane. I mean, it literally is insane. In one sentence, President Trump turned the entire post-war transatlantic security doctrine on its head. He actually, after that, whatever you want to call it, propaganda coup for Putin, saying that he was going to go for full defeat or only negotiate on his terms over Ukraine, to then say that if he was president, he would not just, not come to the defense of NATO allies, but would encourage Putin to do whatever the hell he likes. It's almost unbelievable. It's an insanity to say that, because that is the existential crisis that the world faces right now. The post-World War II, global security operation is based on America and its 30 other NATO allies defending each other and coming to each other's rescue and protecting and preserving democracy and security, in the West. And Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, said, whoever is president of the United States,
Drew, because I may want to go back to that in just a moment, because she's not entirely thoroughly, utterly correct on that one. And we have some primary documents to help prove it. But before we do, keep in mind how agitated everybody is. I mean, Chuck Schumer, so agitated that recently he was on state news, that's what we're calling it these days, and really saying, if you don't do this, if you don't spend this money on Ukraine right now, then guess what? Your kid's going to wind up paying the price. I mean, this is really morbid stuff. Take it away, Senator Schumer.
We're at a turning point in America. This bill is crucial, and history will look back on it and say, did America fail itself? Why is it crucial? Well, if we don't aid Ukraine, Putin will walk all over Ukraine. We will lose the war, and we could be fighting in Eastern Europe in a NATO ally in a few years. Americans won't like that. If we don't...
No, Americans won't like that. But why are we choosing to do this? I mean, it's something that Tucker Carlson actually brought up most recently with Mike Pence. I want to say this was last summer, and it totally destroyed, incidentally, Mike Pence's aspirations to be president. I mean, sort of just in a blip. And I don't know what was going on with Mike Pence. I don't know if he just was having a bad day. He was agitated because Tucker was hammering him on other stuff. But this was a pretty telling, or just, I guess, bad moment for Mike Pence when he said effectively he didn't care. He didn't care about Americans. He cared more about Ukraine. You know what clip I'm talking about, right? You know, let's watch it.
January, we'll let somebody transfer some jets.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President, have you, I know you're running for president. You are distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Every city in the United States has become much worse over the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Drive around. There's not one city that's gotten better in the United States. And it's visible. Our economy has degraded. The suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. And yet, your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. I think it's a fair question to ask, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern. Tucker, I've heard that routine from you before, but that's not my concern.
I mean, he doubled down on it. It's not my concern. I've heard that routine from you before. It's not my concern. Hey, listen, buddy, it's got to be your concern. You got to be careful about how the people of the United States are represented, right? You're not just out there stomping for Ukraine. Thank you very much.